All right, so this video is talking about Streets of Strixhaven Limited. I'm Eduardo Sashkolik. I do the Limited for Team Worldly Counsel. I'll have some notes about like specifically the video format and stuff afterwards, so I'd rather dive straight into the Limited side if you're just interested in knowing how to draft this format at a high level. I will caveat some things. One, this is for Pro Tour pod drafts. This will certainly not be adapted for Seal Deck. But even for drafts, it might not be adapted. If you're playing something like a limited championship qualifier draft where you do need to free O, like a 2-1 might be the same record as 0-1 for you, the advice differs slightly. However, I will look into that. The second caveat is compared to what our team usually does, we didn't do as well in this format at the Pro Tour. I'll go into why, because I think it's interesting, and I'm still optimistic that we'll get things right for the next set. But some interesting notes on that. All right. So what I usually do for people who are new to this is when we start the testing house, I'll show up. I will do a preliminary presentation, which just talks about the basics of the format, so that like everybody knows what we're doing before the house drafts, and then I'll go into the actual limited presentation proper. But I think the setup's important so that you understand the context of the set as we go into the testing house. Small little fun note, I had to deliver this quite late because our flight got literally canceled at the gate. So this was delivered quite late, and our limited preparation was not the same as usual. As a result, a little bit disrupted actually. So I start with a mission statement. In this case, I put discovery, dissection, and distillation, basically going into this perspective of how do I explain what's going on to the team, and for me it was that we're gonna have to go tall rather than wide because there's only so many archetypes in this set, or functional archetypes. So here I have what matters in one graphic. So every time I try to like figure out something that isn't just the colors of the set, something that's a little distinct, to make sense of like what's going on in the format. A lot of the top cards in this set, right, are very efficient removal spells, but the other second class of cards are basically anything that generates value, right? There's a ton of the cards here at the top at common and uncommon that are all like come into play and draw an extra card or create an extra resource or deal with a resource as I come into play. Obviously, Arcane Omen, Snarl's Song are kind of putting more stress at that level, but then I talk about like how the set works. So in this case, if you I'm saying this if you haven't played Secrets of Strixhaven. If you have, all of this should be familiar to you. The set has 5 primary archetypes. There's a few extra free color plus one. So at this point, we hadn't. Again, this is 3 days into the set, so we hadn't really locked in like the actual super archetypes yet. But something that was apparent were that cards that were controlling the board were doing better than onboard cards, like the enter, the battlefield triggers. The removal was doing better than, say, having creatures of certain stats and with backed up with combat tricks. It also meant that, like, if you ran creatures without inbuilt advantage, it put you at risk of a value-driven answer. So, for example, you run an X2, they Tome Blast. That's a real problem. It was why, for example, in Red-White, the creatures were performing well in the stats, but cards like Pursue the Past were. For me, at least initially, right, the white decks were performing best, but functionally that's a combination of undervaluations of a lot of the cheap curve cards, which is kind of typical, happens in a lot of sets. Red-white and black-white aren't traditional aggro decks. Yes, they are aggressive for black-white especially, not so much red-white, which is more mid-rangey. But essentially you're applying the format's principle of value first to enable and maintain pressure over time. But the thing is, there are multiple margin style cards that express themselves, but only in specific scenarios, right? Like the converge cards are best in the decks that can enable them, and so forth. So then I just present the color strength and draft. This is nothing that should be new to you. We'll go through this quickly, but basically the colors are this set is roughly balanced early on. Like while the white archetypes are performing better. And I can put Circa Vis's day one view. They were performing much better day one. After a few days, it was already adjusting to be a little more equal across the board. So I'd call like Strixhaven functionally a balanced format. But and then so like that's important, right? Is like letting the team know, yes, the white archetypes are performing a bit better, but in my speech, I'm being specific to them that the set is probably quite balanced. Then we go into the archetypes, so I won't spend too much time here. I think that this was like day free when we were looking at things. So, looking at how like the best cards and the archetypes, things that are getting you into them. So in black white, it was again. None of this should be new to any of you if you've drafted this set at all. But yeah, just cheap cards, disruptive. Red white was again a lot of removal. Again, cheap cards. The main difference would have been the Rubble Rouser. I think that was like the key differentiator for me in red white. Outside of like the straight up gold cards, but we'll get to that. I was highlighting that Spirit Mascot was not the reason to be in red white. It's a card you can run in your red white decks, but it's not the reason to pivot into it. So that was while we were doing our pod drafts, that was important to highlight already from the get go, just to make sure we have accurate information from those pod drafts. Try to put a break. I couldn't find something smarter than this. So, essentially, the point I was going to make is that there are, for the next archetypes, they're split into kind of two versions. You have the straight up 2-color one, which is this, value with removal blue red deck. I was highlighting already Divergent Equation as an important card in our pot chat testing. And on the other side, I was highlighting that there's kind of this converge mechanic in the blue-red decks often. Snarl Song's the easy one, but you can even have something like Titan's Grave if you go really off the deep end for Arcane Omens and Snarl Song. Quandrix was kind of similar. It had more cards that were specifically blue-green rather than blue-red. That seemed easier to modulate spell-wise. But again, like a lot of the best blue-green cards were just those kind of converge cards. Now, as for black-green, it was actually kind of there's actually a lot of volume here in black-green, but the important thing is highlighting to the team that it wasn't about like the life gain theme. It was more about these kind of it was kind of like the mid-range theme, right? Like I'm playing these efficient and good removal spells. And creatures. So it was much more a mid-range deck from the get-go in testing. Then usually, like in pod drafts, right, like the thing is online, you get data, right, but like that doesn't necessarily give you all the information you need for a Pro Tour pod draft. So the archetypes we need to discover, especially early on. So I kind of so one of the things was discussing the variance between archetypes. So that's why this image is here. It's essentially that, there's blue-green, but, there's blue-green soup, there's blue-green mid-range with creatures. We need to, like, figure out what those variants are. And that was kind of the main argument. It's that the main archetypes needed exploration because there's so many variants within the archetypes, the main ones, that a lot of the edge might be in deck construction. And when I mean deck construction, means also the way you draft, right? Because if you know you need to build a deck in a specific way, then that also means that, like, you're going to be looking for those cards in the draft. Now, this point will actually come up as one of the things that I don't think was highlighted well enough in the last presentation. But the main archetype was trying to figure out soup because there's no data for soup functionally because 17 land splits things by distinct 3-color, 4-color, and 5-color archetypes, and it's very hard to kind of collate that stuff early on, right? There's no like JSON file or something that you can download or check this early, so you kind of have to figure it out. Didn't seem like it would be super hard to figure out, just so we're clear, but it made sense in our pod drafts that we would do the effort for this. Then the other thing is I wanted to make sure people were adjusted on card strengths. I talk about colorless cards specifically because we asked everybody in the team to do a few drafts ahead of time or to read the data so that they have a rough idea of what's going on, and then we can adjust in the pod drafts at the house. But colorless cards are typically the ones with the highest error rate, right? So it's best to kind of highlight the archetypes they tend to be best in so that people know them in advance, so I don't have to redo that work, right? If we know a colorless card is good in an archetype, I'd rather say that, and then we discover other things as a result of that. So Potioner's Trove we highlighted as like the spells based soup decks, love it. As coach, highlighting Sundering Archaic, the blue-green special creatures, Page and Ronchorus Archaic. In the end, we never really made Page work. I'll just highlight that now. It's just like the way play boosters work, it's really hard to guarantee numbers of commons. So while it is a backup, say Noxious Newt, not really something that came up. Talked about Major Tower Referee as a salvage drop, 2-drop for red-white, right? If people fought over red-white. And then obviously together as one and dismember. Discuss as usual single card discussion, so things that are really weird and need more exploration. So we look at special build, Mystical Archives. You might spot big score. That one was because it was highlighting good data early. That didn't pan out as the set went on. We didn't open it. So we had this question actually come up during the main presentation. I kind of highlighted that it was like a dud. Like it's a fine card, but like nothing too special. I also put Mathematics technically in special build Mystical Archives, but I meant like cards that will like kind of win the game. Wisdom of Agents and Divergent Equation. We wanted to see how those cards worked in practice. And then finally the shells for cards like Ronchorus Archaic, the dual lands, and 2 Degrees Zimone's Experiment, which early on was presenting well, later on did not. So as a result, I gave objectives, right? The idea is to, as always, search a mission statement for the Pro Tour, to figure out pod draft dynamics, and then some questions, right? Like, do the white shells hold under the scrutiny of higher table evaluations? Like, you know, okay, well, people are like, red-white's the best. What happens when 4 people draft red-white? Is it still good? We wanted to figure out deck variants. We wanted to figure out the soup archetype and subset of soup. Wanted to understand draft positioning with colorless cards and lands. And then finally, you know, if we do these pod drafts stresses, what happens? What are those late cards that give you high equity margins? And then do the best we can from that information. Again, the set is new, right? One thing that was new for this presentation that I didn't do the last time is I detailed what we do at the house. And I think some of you might be curious, so I'll highlight these. We do our testing house as they are played at the Pro Tour. So you do all 3 rounds. And it's important to play all 3 rounds even at 0-2 because the difference between an 0-3 record and a 1-2 record is gigantic. So you need to know like the difference between a true train wreck disaster and, you know, a deck that just didn't have its time in the sun or didn't do so well, but could have been good. I view drafts as open book. I mean, I'm not interested in people like knowing everything in advance. So the first couple of drafts, like people can check data, chat with watchers, whatever. My general angle as well is that they can draft as you like. Like it's okay to take a pick that like is quote unquote incorrect. My goal with it though is that people justify their picks. So like if they go, I took this to try it, but I think card X or Y was better, then that to me is totally fine. But they need to know that, right? Like that's part of the learning process. For gameplay, I will highlight that I think we were weak. I was trying to push forward for people to ask questions on their gameplay. And unfortunately, I started spotting an issue too late. So one of the last pod drafts, I had some time to sit down and relax, which was a little difficult at the testing house, but I had a little bit of extra time. So I sat down and watched the game with one of our teammates. And to me, it became apparent that the teammate in question was struggling heavily to play their aggressive deck. Like it was use of attacks and tricks in a way that didn't make sense to me, or anybody who had played limited for a while. So I sat down with them afterwards to chat, and the problem is like self-catching issues in gameplay is actually kind of difficult for a lot of folks preparing for competitions at this level. They tend to do so in constructed, but sometimes in limited they don't see the problem, so they can't even like ask for help. So I'm gonna probably be a lot more aggressive next Pro Tour with people to be highlighting game players, like make it a habit that like after a match, okay, this is things I noticed that was really weird, what's going on, like that there is an actual gameplay debrief. I think I'm gonna be much more aggressive on that because otherwise we're gonna struggle to perform at the competition, and unfortunately this time I spotted the issue too late. So if you do these things, don't presume that people will proactively highlight their own issues. Most people don't think that way. Make them talk about it. And it's not a question of being defensive. We're here to learn. I would presume most people will make mistakes in their games, and so as a result, I'm coming at it from a place of you probably played incorrectly, and I probably played incorrectly, but we want to like improve, because mostly we love the game and we want to know how to play better. Right, and then just highlighting that we do draft reviews because those are very high learning potential, and that they should also do casual house drafts, because as much as I like pro drafts at the house, we'll never do enough to learn limited completely for most folks. So like they'll need to do some number just to get gameplay representation. So that's what I do before the like at the start of the house. So it's relatively quick. It doesn't last usually more than half an hour. And it's just to set the scene. I think for this one, the preliminary was fine. It's kind of hard to vastly improve on something that like is done 3 days after a set releases. So I'm not too worried about that. So I think also looking back, the premise is fine. I think the last execution is where it failed a little bit. So that's the thing. So this is the actual, we're going to start the actual presentation and give the team like on the Wednesday morning before the Pro Tour. So by this point, all the lists are kind of submitted and we're done. So the mission statement I had for this one was to plan for the expected. Now I use this, but the main thing, right, is that as we were doing the pod drafts, it became very clear that there's only, and I mean with the data, there's only so many archetypes. There's literally no salvage archetype in the sense of like Lorwyn salvage. Sometimes off the elemental pair, like off the typal pairs, you can sometimes get something. This set, there's nothing like that at all. So like you know what your metagame is, right? One of the things I used here, this is a French website. I didn't put the credit. Let me get the name right. If you're interested in this, give me a second because I didn't prepare this sadly. I might put the resource in. I'll ask the person who did the resource in the group about it. It's a resource that it's called Limitless. So done by Korgman. So if you want to check out that website, I'd highly recommend it. It portrays like 17 lands data in a way that I think is visually quite appealing. Personally, I think a lot of coming back to the actual content of Limited. What was interesting here is at the top is a common is the black-green dual land, right? So this kind of broke my brain a tiny bit into like how do I actually, not like I couldn't understand this. I think it's understandable because right, if you're playing that card, it means you're playing Arcane Omens and Snarl Song, so it's effectively an uncommon. The problem I had was how do I take that information and discuss it with the team in a way that helps them when they're doing their Pro Tour drafts. So again, looking at Teamer, for example, Johnny's response was, this is sorted by win rate when main deck, and Johnny's response was one of the top cards, which implied that essentially do what you want was the correct take for a lot of these decks. Now, when actually looking at color strength and draft, the 4 and 5 color decks could actually sustain. The main free color archetype that was working was Jeskai, which we'll get into. And Orzhov and Boros were kind of still, putting that win rate ahead. Like now there was a clear divide on this. One of the things, by the way, the power grades, if you stop here, don't match the percentages. You might be wondering why Jeskai and Simic are D and B with equal win rates. It's because these are adjusted for top play in the sense that when I was looking at top player win rates and the way decks were constructed, the multicolor decks were performing a little better, so that's why those grades are a bit higher. This will cause a small problem in a bit, which I'll get to. I tend to put these images to just break the flow because these often I'll be interrupted by questions. I'll be quite heavy content, so I put stuff like this to help break the content up. The main thing, though, that I did want to impress is that most Pro Tours, I am kind of in a mystery box as to what the rest of the field knows about the format. And I have to figure that mystery box as best as I can, right? So, like, often I get it right, but not always. This I was right. The problem wasn't this premise. The problem is the way I presented the content does not safeguard against this premise, and I'll get into what I mean by that. So, like, the thing was, right, the opponents will know about the good converge cards. They'll know about the good red-white cards at this Pro Tour. While you might get them late, I wouldn't bank on it. And for sure, my first draft and second draft, I saw, like, not a blue card. Many soup decks. So yeah. Now, going back into the base of it, right, how the set works. I felt that it was trivial for most decks to deal with the board state. The cards that I was studying that were lowering in win rate over time had combat mechanics like flying, lifelink. Those were weaker than usual. In truth, for me, the set had only one true two-color archetype, which was black-white, and I'll get to that. I don't mean like straight up blue-red doesn't work or black-green doesn't work. That's not what I'm getting at, but I will get into what I mean by this. But, you know, there are two mid-range half archetypes, red, white, and black, green. To a degree, this is where I think I made an error, at least, for sure, is I should have put blue, green in there. And one thing that's not present in this presentation that it should be is how to draft the mid-range creature decks. So those are black, green, and blue, green. Because both those decks kind of want efficient mid-range creatures. And then, like, what do you do as a result of having those mid-range packages, right, of creatures? Differs slightly between black, green, and blue, green, but it's there. You have cards I'm not going to highlight in the rest of the presentation. That's why I'm taking a little bit of time to interrupt here. But in black, green, right, you don't want like you'll want something like Send in the Past. You want your curve to be at 2s and 3s. In blue, green, it's the same. You want your curve is at 2s or 3s. You want blue, green to have the dive down with you. Black, green probably, you know, a little distinct, but because I did it in this presentation, kind of remodel the black, green, and blue, green decks, the creature based ones, in consideration of a more soup heavy metagame or red, white, mid-range metagame. So, like, how do you break through that metagame? I think was a small disservice, at least to our testing team, and it caused issues. So that was where things broke a bit for our team. And it doesn't come up in the rest of the presentation, but I wanted to kind of highlight it here. But yeah, so the thing, right, we got our two-color archetype black, white. We have red, white, and black, green. But the thing with black, green, and red, white cards, a lot of the best cards get taken by other people. So if you look at like Grapple with Death or Johnny's Response, what we saw is that they get taken by other drafters. That ended up true. Now, other decks that are not those are all colors. Now, and that's where things failed for me as well. Is blue red can be a straight up two-color mid-range deck if you have all the rares. That's what we saw at the house. Black green can be if you have the rares. It's just a question of like if your seed is open because the colors are kind of still balanced in the set. You should still go for your archetype. If you are the one person in your two-color archetype, you should go for it. And mathematically, with soup decks, that's more likely to happen because you have your soup deck and you have a red-white shell. So if you're outside of those two, you are more likely to be able to end up in a straight-up two-color deck. So I should have highlighted those more as a way to read the metagame. But yeah, continuing with what we did though. The ease of splashing and incredible powerful, right, like Arcane Omens and Snarl Song, kind of create this situation where you just make it work, right? You just make your mana work. You take those cards and figure it out. And that was the thing, right? The best rare in Mythics, the Converge cards, when you draw them, they're just so much better than anything else going into their decks. So you need to buy time and draw to them, and that sees a win rate, right? Improvement. And it creates a specific metagame and functional matchup matrix of three type cores of decks, right? So you have your aggro deck, which is black, white, mid-range, and soup. And the truth is, the soup decks beat the mid-range decks usually, right? So that's why red, white being overdrafted causes issues because then your soup decks take over, and that happened to me at the Pro Tour. Like I had two very good red, white decks. Not that I was forcing them. They did just come to me. It's not. If you want to look at my Pro Tour decks, I think they're publicly available online. The decks came to me. It wasn't like I was looking for it. It was just something that happened. The first draft I was kind of staying open into soup, and the second draft was straightforward 2-color. But the thing I mistaked in there is, like, if you have this matchup matrix of free core decks, you should be structured. Our premise is correct. The one I'm coming to, which is that unlocking the highest equity in games needs a comprehensive strategic approach with a modular sideboard, taking the free main matchups into account. Stretching it further, it should have been that the mid-range archetypes devolve into mid-range aggro. Because if red-white is overdrafted, that means that you are less likely to face true mid-range battles. Mid-range aggro tends to beat aggro. Mid-range aggro sometimes beats also soup. And so, like, looking to build your decks that way was the way to go. And not identifying that was the main problem with the strategy we had. So I'm letting you know now what that is like for the Pro Tour. You need to, and for future drafts, you need to design your mid-range decks from the get-go to have low curves and be aggressive against, because your expected metagame will include a lot of soup control decks where that will pay off. And then you can have a sideboard against aggro down the line. But yeah, for me, it is true, though, that this set is about controlling the pace of play. Execution, not fury, here was our downfall. You need to decide in a matchup if you're the aggressor by time. And then, you know, if the deck is best in class, right? If you're playing soup with Brain Freeze or Mathemagics, then, like, you are the best version of control for its mirror. So, like, your whole goal is to just buy time forever, because you're not going to lose any mirror matches, and you're always going to be the slowest. So you have to just be ready for decks that are functionally all faster than you in Fury terms. All right. For the rest of this, I kind of mentioned the issues, but I wanted to kind of like dive more into the strategy we had for the Pro Tour and like where it's going to lead to. So the way the pod draft metagame was happening, you know, the archetype-expressive cards tend to be taken early. Like Arcane Omens isn't coming late, right? People are going to fight over cards that enable potential in the middle of a pack. Like, you know, your pack's empty. All these random 4-drops. You're taking that Potioner's Trove, those dual lands in the dark. This is where I think the 2-color archetypes really solidify. It's because in the middle of the pack is when you get your kind of unique cards for your archetypes coming up. But then, like, because people take lands early, and pack 1's typically going to be weaker than pack 2 and free, players are going to be forced to fill the lower end of their deck with suboptimal cards from future packs if you don't stabilize your position early. If I'm saying that, like, sideboarding is important in this format, you need more than 20 free cards in this set as a result. So the decks we were seeing struggling were those who were staying open too late. This is actually a pretty bad set to stay open, and I'll get into why. But and then I was asking the team that their late equity was coming from combat tricks for black-white, like Interjection, Masterful Flourish, and Dig-Side Inventory for black-white, and Seize the Spoil, Quick Study for the soup opens. This is true. What I failed to say was that if you're in mid-range, take whatever 2-drop or free drop is coming your way. That can change creature stat sizing. But anyways, the leverage, you use the low number of existing true archetypes, right? There's not that many. And you want to use pack 1's wheel to secure your appropriate filler and sideboard cards. So that way you have the chance to interchange your strategy into post-board games. So I was advocating, in reality, I asked Elcano if I could use this image beforehand. He was fine with it. But I was advocating essentially, and sorry, this cuts off. It says pod draft dynamics positioning. That essentially for a strategy of just go for it. Because there's only so many macro archetypes. You might as well lock pack 1 with reason. It's not like, and the cards are going into every archetype. Like if you're in red, white, or soup, like all the good white removal, all the good red removal is already going into its stuff. So it's not like you can really, like, what are we missing, right? You're not getting anything good late randomly. So you kind of need to lock pack 1 with reason, or like if pack 2 starts, you need to go as soon as you see the red sign. In a way, the set is predetermining what I would call a medium way draft. It's kind of like you have already by default a number of preferences. For me, right, red white's best cards are taken early because the soup players want your Pursue the Past, they want your Johnny's Response, they want your Tome Blasts. So you're gonna have a lot of red white branches early. And that's the thing. So it leaves you as a knowledgeable player to do the following. The black-white position, this can be active or listened to. You can use tricks, right? But what's nice is like, if you get tricks late and then like in pack 2 it starts being open, you can dive into it, right? So that's why black-white I felt was a good archetype to figure. Mid-range position, I call it a passive position, where like, because we're often seeing like the black-green seed getting like Belk quite late, or black, sorry. You know, pack 2 or pack 3 pick 5, that was like common, or the uncommon essence knit scholar, I believe. The truth though is that, again, we should have reconfigured the mid-range decks a little bit to be better against the suit decks. And then finally the suit position, which is where you leverage that key card like Arcane Nomen's Divergent Equation in order to create an inevitable position. So I give a positioning example. This is like almost like a persona I create. So in this case, I call it a locker. You know, somebody who prefers finding their path as quickly as possible. So they aggressively lock an archetype determining card. So that's, you know, Arcane Nomen's Scrolling Administrator, Essence Knit Scholar. If their archetype is open, then you just go. You're done. If it's dry, then you take that best card that helps you into black-white, card draw. What makes sense. Pack 2, if again you get what you need, you go there, but if not, you might have to jump into another first major archetype. And then your idea is to take good impact sideboard cards over filler level cards. So this set's a little weird in best of 3, in that your 26, 27, 28th card do come into play. So in most sets you only need 23, and the 24th is basically useless or very irrelevant. In this set, like the sideboard cards like Return the Flavor, Glorious Decay, really high impact. I'll get into Return the Favor, actually. That's a special one. If the draft is dry, you know, not many options, then you're going to have to prioritize card selection, because there's going to be an archetype determining card that you've taken early, and as a result, you're going to just need to get to it. So these are cards that value up in pack 1. For me, there's flexibility. There's not that many of those cards, but there's a few of like Strixhaven Coach. Variety in the sense of like removal, a variety of archetypes, right? Johnny's Response goes in a lot of archetypes. Burst Lightning goes in a lot of archetypes. And then finally, necessity. So cards that like where your deck does not function, or it functions substantially less well when it doesn't exist in your deck. Divergent Equation is one. The Converge cards are another. These are like kind of what I highlighted to the team as pack 1 value late pickups. Combat Tricks, the card draw. The card draw was performing better too over time. Seize the Spoil is also a really key one to enable an early Arcane Omens or Snarl Song. But again, I think most people figure this out at the Pro Tour. I faced Seize the Spoils plus Snarl Song. It wasn't complicated to figure out. That said, I did get one like almost last pick. So engineering card flow in black, white. Cost of Brilliance was a pretty common, right? Because it's just card draw. We noticed that like you just needed anything that like helped selection, so that was important. That's why Pursue the Past is so good in red white. It just helps that deck function forever. And then obviously there's a ton of different card flow. We really liked Visionary's Dance specifically because it's card flow plus a win condition. Which is kind of difficult, kind of a neat split cards. Even if the win rate doesn't really express this card fully, it's pretty good when things are scrappy. Then I look into archetypes. So I look into specifically cards that are good for just the archetype, and then cards that are good for other people as well. So black-white has a ton of cards that are great in just its archetype. I'm going to skip through these a little bit. You can get this, I think, information from other people who talk about limited, and I think if you're coming here, you're more like interested in the like approach side. So I'm gonna go a bit quicker, but yeah, I rephrased the tricks. I didn't talk about Stargaze. Stargaze is supremely important as the curves go lower for black, white, and black, green too, right? Your black, green deck should have more 2-drops and 3-drops. Then Stargaze starts going up and up in evaluation, because when you don't have as many 4-drops or even 5s, well, okay, you need some top end, but not too much, right? In black, white, you have the Render Speechless, and in black, green, there's some. But Stargaze gets better, right? Because Stargaze gets much better the lower your curve is, simply because having that one-off option that can reload, like casting this for X equals free, on a turn where things are kind of equal, can really help push the game into your favor. Then I look into red-white. So again, red-white has these two cards that are specifically their stars. Scrollsmith was not performing well, splashed in soup, so that was why it's there. Again, another one to kind of help. I know these look silly, but they do help lighten the room, and they do help education. So the thing with red-white is like all these cards were being captured by the blue drafters. All these red removal spells, and even these white ones, right? Like the blue-red drafters were splashing Pursue the Past, Colossus, Johnny's Response, at least when they were performing well, which I expected top players to do. And they did do this. And in black-white, you lose your Interceptor and Repel Calamity. But there's less of a fight with black-white. And then I did this for every archetype. And this is where like I think the issue was when we're going to black green and blue green, but because I should have spotted that these two uncommons are already quite a bit, and there are other ways to build black green to be more unique, but a lot of the black green cards get taken by the blue green deck soup. But again, there's a mid range creature deck with these cards, so that's where that missed out. Black green did also have this little bit of an interesting thing. The top end card creatures in the straight up 2-color were bad, like the 4/5 is pretty terrible and all that stuff. Something that's kind of neat is Stirring Honormancer and Fractal Mascot are really potent splashes in black green, and you can splash them similarly easily. Fractal Mascot is actually pretty okay in these kind of creature mid range decks when you're trying to push damage, so these were good. Something else with black green that I should have spotted was the 4/2 Trampler and Cost of Brilliance. Typically, I didn't really like the 4/2 Trampler because Tome Blast was a thing, but you can engineer your deck in a way to, you know, force them to use the Tome Blast a bit earlier on your other 2-drop. And there's only so many around the draft, right? So it's possible 4/2 plus Cost of Brilliance was also a strategy. Yeah, so blue-red. Aside from Sonar, all the blue-red cards were kind of cards that everybody else wanted. There was nothing like in the blue-red archetype that somebody else didn't want. Maybe at rare level, right? But not uncommon. Like Stress Dream was going into blue-green. The Converge cards were going everywhere. Stock Up blue-green. Red-white wants your removal, right? So like all of the cards you wanted are taken elsewhere. And this is, yeah, important. Blue-green is more creature-based. And this is actually quite a lot of unique cards. Like, while yes, technically Additive Evolution and Studios First Year are wanted elsewhere, they're not too fought over. And there is an aggressive slanted blue-green deck, not just the Converge archetype. Like, it might splash a card or two, but yeah. Then we talk about soup, the elephant in the room. The soup powerhouses, Snarl Song, Arcane Omens together as one. Even Molten Mode is completely ludicrous in the soup decks. Because in straight up red-white, getting to 8 mana is like not necessarily trivial, because you mostly want to rummage away your extra lands. So 8 is doable, but not that great. Whereas in the soup archetypes, exactly what you want, right? Kill a thing, kill another. Then we talk about soup in terms of card draw. So Seize the Spoils, Quick Study, Pursue the Past. So these were like cards that were helping you get to the good stuff. Visionaries Dance Again. I'm going through this fast because we've gone through it. The soup block pieces. These are the cards that are going to end the game in your favor. So the XX spells, Wisdom of Ages. So like mass card draw that will eventually win you the game in some form or fashion. And then the fun one, which is the soup Mirror Breakers. This slide was actually not presented originally. It was a post script slide. We talking with Derek, Davis, he came up with the idea, and I felt bad that I didn't think of it. But Return the Favor won me a lot of post-board matches at the Pro Tour. Probably my favorite sideboard card in the set. You can't really ever play it in best of 1. It's just not a thing. But in best of 3, there's a few things that highlight. One is you can redirect Arcane Omens, and that's pretty great. It doesn't copy the Converge spells, though, so it's pretty bad against the others. If your opponent's soup deck has a number of creatures, you can use the redirect mode on the removal. One of my favorite uses of Return the Favor is on the Mythic Lessons, because you get a copy forever as well. And the nice part is you can do it on the copy. This was a 4 or 5 minute judge call at the Pro Tour to confirm this. But yeah, so I did this on my opponent's white lesson, and it was pretty strong. So again, and it's a card I got like 13th pick, like before last. So like there are, even at the Pro Tour, there are still like late equity spots like this that exist. And the fact I got this pick 13 means that people kind of forgot that was an option. But it's why like you do pot drafts, and because best of 3 is not best of 1, it's not the same. Veil of Summer is pretty good. In the soup mirror, pretty impossible to mathematics your opponent against that one. Stroke, if you can get it. I would even splash Render Speechless in the long soup mirrors. And then for me, Brain Freeze is probably the best soup mirror breaker. It's very cheap. It's an instant, almost impossible to fight through. Like not really suitable against the aggressive or mid-range decks, but against the soup decks, it is probably one of the best mirror breakers. I honestly consider taking it over an Johnny's Response in my red-white deck. Ended up that Response won me a game that it needed to, and Brain Freeze would have won me a game that Response didn't, so kind of a wash. But that's to tell you the power of Brain Freeze is I thought about playing it red-white mid-range, specifically because even if I don't main deck and I board it, right, in red-white mid-range, I can always beat the soup deck post-board. Pre-board, I'm in trouble, right, because their removal lines up. They have better threats / options against me. But post-board, I can beat them this way. So these are things that are important to keep in mind. And again, in red-white, the reason I thought about it is because you have the 3/2 for Striker. So what you can do is cast any 2 spells, hopefully cheap ones. You can even have the Goblin, which I don't like. That makes a treasure. And then you cast the 3/2 for Striker, Brain Freeze them in response. You could also set it up so that you Brain Freeze, so it's +1 Storm, and you can even set it up where you remove the Brain Freeze and then play next turn, right, off, and then some extra spells. All right, so at this point, it's additional resources. These are more like card evaluations, going up, down. I'm going to go through these quickly. I don't think they're as... Like, they're good if you're planning for a tournament. Just pause on them. There's not a lot of commentary here. This is a position of lands, with key cards as to why you would want those lands. So again, just pause. I'm going to go through this fast. Just pause if you need notes. These are cards that are a bit worse than they were at the start of the format. Archaic's Agony has really gone down. It's because there's just not things to get with it, right? Like, you're not killing a free drop or 4-drop with it anymore, and getting value that way. These are just cards that go down because the format's not about the thing they're trying to do, right? We're not about board presence and combat damage, like stat damage. Cards that were going up were the soup decks cards. Cards that also went up are the cards that are make it work. They're complicated cards to make work, right? Loots, Brain Freeze, even Transcendent Archaic's difficult to make it work. And as players got used to the deck construction around these cards, they got better. These are bonus sheet cards, so these are... I'm going to go through these quickly. But basically, one of the things is when preparing for the competition, a lot of people are worried about card evaluations. I don't necessarily see that as a struggle fundamentally. Like, just look at the data. But I know some people struggle, and want the work presented to them, so I do it that way. Basically, I just let them know what's up. Actually, I'll highlight here. The reason I'm loath to doing stuff like this is because we waste a lot of time discussing things that just don't happen. Like, we had Armageddon in a draft at the house, and people were discussing forever, like, if the card's good, bad, etc. Here's the thing. It will affect probably at most one of our drafters at the Pro Tour, statistically. At most one. The second thing with it is it's kind of one of those cards that when it is good, your deck kind of makes sense for it. Like, if you're in black-white aggro, you probably want it. If you're in red-white mid-range that's using mana each of its turns, it's probably a sideboard card for the soup mirrors. But we spend time discussing this card. And I don't think more than 30 seconds is appropriate to discuss any individual card unless it specifically modifies an archetype. Like each time you discuss a card, it needs to be in a context, in my opinion, right? So, like, Armageddon is lacking that context. So people go like, oh, what about these scenarios, or it's a bomb, etc. Yeah, and we did spend a lot of time on it. So I just put them in single card strategy, and I essentially go, you figure it out. I normally don't, but I don't like wasting time discussing a more than mythic card when they can't when teammates are struggling to remember pick orders within 2-color archetypes, right? It's a waste of energy and resources to do this. You can do it like week 4 or 5 of format, right? Like everything's so explored, everyone knows so much what they're doing. Yeah, we can spend like 5 minutes on Armageddon. It's not a problem. Right now, they're not like, they're not like, oh, how can I draft my mid-range deck right to beat suit? They're not asking those questions, and that's my problem. And I didn't ask that question, but that's on me, right? I have more experience, I should know. But yeah, so I discuss cards that are single card strategies, like things that are very peculiar. I let them know that like if they're not comfortable with these, it's totally okay to give up to a degree. I'd rather they not, but I understand. Discuss cyber cards, so cards that don't perform well but do in some spots. These are all that. Dual Caster Mage actually has a combo with the blue mythic lesson, which Arne Hushenbeth did he was in my pod and pulled that off. Not against me, I wasn't playing against him, but that's kind of cool. Didn't spot that. Yeah, these are cards that are irrelevant except post board. And then one thing is I didn't bother putting more imagery. It was like, look, if I didn't mention the card, don't play it. Okay, and then the last slides are like cards I didn't cover. So sideboard cards like Pick Your Poison, Glorious Decay, Spell Pierce, Chase Inspiration. Again, important in those creature decks. Talked about underrated and overrated cards, so we'll go through this quick because like these are underrated cards that are quite good in that black-white deck. These are underrated cards that you can get. I was wondering, by the way, why Interjection had a good win rate in red-white. That was kind of a mystery to me. And then I realized that as people were fighting over red-white, you had to start playing a card like Expressive Fire Dancer, and I was like, oh, you could Interjection plus 5 mana spell with Fire Dancer, and that's like 12 plus whatever damage you've done. Okay, that makes sense to me. So these are cards that are underrated. Worth noting for underrated and overrated cards, I only put cards that I believe people will do so at the Pro Tour. Like a rare that performs terribly usually won't come into overrated, because if I think Pro Tour players will adjust. So these are overrated cards that come in uncommon, mostly expensive, do nothing, functionally creatures. I mean, I still have to play Pigman Wrangler. Sometimes you have to play these cards. But my point on them is just don't take them early. They have their spots, but yeah, be careful. Overrated rares and mythics. Those were things I was seeing played at the house, picked at the house more than late, etc. Grave Researcher was probably our most overrated rare at the house. People thought it was quite good. I thought so too until I checked. And then I go into like top cards per archetype, commons, uncommons, etc. I'm just gonna go through these slides very slowly, so that you have time to pause, take the notes you need to. I don't think anything in these commons, uncommons, CUs are particularly more than like read and research, but if you wanted, yeah. And on top of that, like I call them archetype-specific cards rather than secret gold cards. But yeah, cards that are good only in one archetype, but it's not very clear on first read of the card that that's the case. Yeah, and that's it. Okay, so thank you to the so I usually do the slide to finish to let just the team know that it's over. I'll thank you if you've listened to all of this long. So we're gonna spend the last couple of minutes on things for you to note. So I'm going to start with the things for you as a competitor, because I think they're the most important. The most important parts for this content are probably going to be limited championship qualifiers and the Arena Open. And I'll give you what I think for both of those. Limited championship qualifiers, you need to free your draft. I'm sure losing in the finals, you'll get some prizes. I suspect most of you will care more about winning than any other result. That means that you are not pod drafting normally. You are pod drafting, but your goal is to 3-0 your pod. You need to high roll. Even a top player probably needs to high roll. It's very unlikely that you are so far and above the next player at your table that it can take too static a strategy. I feel that you need to know your matchups. You can't draft a deck and go like, if I face this matchup, I lose. In a 10 set archetype, you can do that. In a free 4 set, like archetype set, you can't do that. So you need to have a plan. You need to have a plan against the black-white aggressive deck, or black aggressive decks generally. A plan against the creature decks. Usually that's kind of implied with a lot of the cards in the set, but have a plan. A plan in the mid-range mirrors, and then finally a plan in this against the soup decks. So you need to consider while drafting, how do I make sure I can win these 4 matchups, right? Aggressive, creature-based mid-range, spell-based mid-range, typically blue, red, white, so Jeskai colors, and soup-based decks. You need to know how to beat those 4 archetypes. You need to construct your deck in that way. That means you're taking in advanced sideboard cards that are for each of them. Typically, the metagame, I would guess, this is best guess, not statistically checked. Aggro decks will tend to be reliably solid across the board. You probably just need like an extra trick, an extra discard spell, disruption spell, like just an extra card draw spell, like kind of just to vary against different decks. So if you draft aggressive, it's just like having an extra piece you can modulate on. Creature stat sizing too. If they have a bunch of Tome Blast, then you need an X free in your sideboard, for example. If you're drafting the creature black, green, blue, green decks, you're lowering your curve to help your matchup against soup. If you're in blue, green, that'll be like something like Chase Innovation, the dive down. That'll be higher priority. If you're in black, green, something like Extra Send the Pasts will start being more important. Mind Roots. So modulate things based on what you do, and like you might have to dial down like your worst removal spells right against soup. Soup typically will be your worst matchup, since against you should be good against aggro to start with, but make sure you have anti-soup cards. Same with the Jeskai mid-range decks, blue, red, red, white. I think blue, red has if you're in straight up 2-color, probably has a better shot. If you're in red, white, mid-range though, you dig a lot, so you can get to some of the key cards. I like Return the Favor in the sideboard. That's been really good for me. I think it'll be really good for you. In red, white, just make sure your curve is low. Make sure that you have creatures that play around their removal spells, right? If they have a lot of absolute removal, like destroy target creature, no questions, you have extra 2-drops in your board. If they have a lot of Tome Blast, you have extra X-freeze. If you have the luxury of seeing something like an archive like Brain Freeze or Armageddon or something, use that to your advantage. You're probably at a disadvantage, but those you can dig to those cards and hopefully get there. You make sure that you know their removal for creature stat sizing, right? If they have the deal 4, make sure that you either have X5s, or because those can be hard, like for example, you might have Dig Site Inventory, play your X4, make sure it's pumped up to X5 right away, because that can really change the games. And then if you're in soup, make sure you can win the soup mirror. The soup mirror, if you are behind, you are probably never going to win. It is quite close to an 80-20 matchup when your opponent has Mathemagics or Brain Freeze and you just don't have answers to those cards. So make sure you are ready. If you are in a green-based soup deck, what I would really advise is to take mid-range 2 and 3 drops that can deliver beatdown. So that like if things come to the worst and you cannot win out with the cards in your deck versus the cards in your opponent's deck, that you can reconfigure 5 to 10 cards. It can be that much because a lot of these mid-range threats come late. And if you're in the soup deck otherwise against aggro, you probably are already configuring against aggro and mid-range with as much removal as you can. So so that's but again, aim for that 3-0. Know which archetypes you're comfortable with. Don't be afraid with soft forcing or forcing. It's totally okay. You need things to pan out your way. And it's not like a Pro Tour draft where every win counts. Only your first loss counts, right? So you just need to high roll. And it's totally okay if you go like, look, most of the time I draft this, I'm not going to win many matches, but the one time the deck does come together, I 3-0 more often than if I was open, then that's what you need to do. All right, that's it for competitive. The last little notes for the approach for people who are more onto the theory and stuff. I felt for this set that looking back, right, I look at preliminary and I talked about going tall, basically, like exploring the archetypes, and I don't think I did a good enough job of that in the actual final result, like not showing trophy decks, not showing like how I would like to construct the decks, etc. That I think caused a lot of the performance downgrade for the team down the line. Part of it, is individual responsibility. People need to look up at data. They need to know gameplay, but still. Next set has a full 4 weeks to a month lead time. 4 weeks, I believe. So there's more time. There's going to be more information on it. Marvel Superheroes is also planned, as far as I know, to be a full 10 set archetype draft set, which finally, I'm getting a little tired of the 5, gotta be honest. It was fine once. I'm not going to go too much into personal feelings. I'd rather talk about the approach. I just have not been... I just think that 5 archetype sets are not very deep and replayable generally. They tend to emulate their week 0 and week 1 metagames with very little evolution, and it's not super interesting past, like, pre-release in week 1. But that's okay. So the next set anyways will be 10 archetypes. We'll have the chance to pod draft, I think, online before we get at the house, which will be nice because it'll give us a way to look at the existing metagame and really get to the next step. I'm going to be a lot stricter on gameplay. It's harder in the past because people don't like playing other limited sets to get better at limited. They want to only play the set that they're going to play at the Pro Tour, which is always the problem, by the way. If you're interested in qualifying for the Pro Tour and you're going in it for the constructed circuit, just play limited at some point. You don't have like the Pro Tour be your first time approaching limited, because then you're not requalifying to the Pro Tour more often than not, right? So just take the time. Limited is awesome. Take the time to play some limited. It's just Magic's best format. Fun. Pure, like, point blank. It is Magic's best format. It always has been. And it's what makes, in my eyes, Magic a much better game than anything else out there. But anyways, so approach. We're probably gonna have more time to look at the archetypes. I'm probably gonna study the set a bit more so that we have a metagame on week 2 or week 3 pod draft, and try to really think as well. Okay, this is the perception of people at the Pro Tour. This is how some people might solve the set. What can I do to beat those 2 groups? And how can I communicate that information to the team so that they can beat those 2 groups? Part of that is going to involve getting better at gameplay. So I think for the next set, I'm going to be much stricter on gameplay with our teammates. They'll have to highlight gameplay. They'll have to discuss it. They can't, they'll need to like debrief their games 5 minutes afterwards. If they're not playing and watching a game, they need to intervene after the game is done, right? Take notes, but not interrupt, but say it after, so that people do get much better at just playing games of limited. Sideboarding, for example, etc. I think sideboarding is a pretty important art in, especially draft. Think that's mostly it. I just want to make sure that the next set we really do our best effort to do well. I think every other team is getting better at limited. I see that as a positive. Whenever more people take limited seriously, it's good for limited competitions to come out. It's good for more people to discuss the set. I think it puts the game in a better place. So I don't have an issue with things getting harder, so to speak, because it means that also more people care. And that to me is really fantastic. Coming on the hour mark, I think that's it. I think that's it for the approach. If you are interested in testing with Worldly Counsel, we will probably we're doing the regional championship group for this, for the next set, but it's probably closed. You'll have to ask for the set after. So that will be the modern season. We do have a group for limited. If you're interested by that, let me know. I might put a link to the application form in this YouTube video. Please bear in mind, while I don't separate by skill, I will separate by motivation, and the limited stuff is a year long, so you probably need to be ready for that. And that is it. Thank you for listening so far. If you have any questions, just message me, comment, whatever. Really appreciate everybody's time listening to this. Have a great day.